What's up, you guys? It's Graham here, and we got a massive problem. And by we, I mean I. And that's what brings me to this video here. Really just hit home for me, and I think it's worth discussing. It's this video from Rachel Camp, the $2 to $3 million early retirement trap nobody warns you about. So with that said, I want to comment on this and the difficulties when it comes to spending money. As soon as you hit the like button, you already subscribed. So just hit the like button. That means a lot to me, and as a thank you for doing that, here's a picture of Patrick. So thanks so much, and also a big thank you to Hone for sponsoring this video, but more on that later.
If you have between $2 and $3 million saved, there is a good chance the biggest threat to your retirement is not the market. It's a habit you built over 30 years that will not turn off. Now, here's why this trap shows up specifically in the $2 to $3 million range. You may genuinely have enough to retire, but you do not have so much that retirement feels obvious. And that gap or that ambiguity is where the brain goes to work. If you have $300,000 saved, the math answers the question for you. But if you have $10 million saved, the math, again, answers it. It's very hard to convince yourself you need one more year to be safe. But at that $2 to $3 million, the brain can always find another reason to wait. What if healthcare costs more than I planned? What if the market crashes right after I retire?
I hate to say it, but it really just scales proportionally. It's not just $2 to $3 million. It's $5 to $6 million, $7 to $8 million, $9 to $10 million. And you would think that at a certain point that just kind of your problems disappear. It doesn't. Just all the problems kind of scale in line with how much you have invested. Now, yes, it's probably a little more pronounced, $2 to $3 million, because you kind of think, well, if the market drops 50%, that goes down to 1 to 1.5, big deal. And the more you have, the more you're insulated from that. But at the same point, usually lifestyle expenses just kind of creep upwards, your expectations creep upwards, and there's never going to be a point, as far as I'm aware, where all of a sudden you'll look at what you have and say, okay, that's it, I'm good. It seems to be. There's the MoneyWise podcast. I really enjoy it. I highly recommend all of you guys watch this podcast, but they analyzed portfolios from people worth over like $50 to $100 million, and it seems like financial security really seems to take about $100 million to the point where you really don't worry at all. But believe it or not, the people with $50 million still have financial concerns. They still worry about something taking them out. They still concern themselves with what if the market does this or that, and I don't know. So I'm just saying it's really a mental thing. Beyond $5 million, it's mostly mental. Unless you just have a crazy spending problem, in which case you probably got to work on that first.
Now, this is what I call the high achiever paradox. The habit that built that $2 to $3 million portfolio is the same habit that will not let you retire. And what retirement asks of you is to reverse it. Stop saving, and not just stop saving, but start spending from your nest egg. The habit does not switch that easily. It fights back in ways that feel completely rational in the moment. The hesitation to spend feels like discipline. The instinct to protect feels like wisdom. And the urge to wait one more year feels like you're being responsible.
It's so difficult. Like, I'd never touch the principal. Ever. All I do is I basically just take all the money I make from like YouTube and like other sort of stuff, and I invest it. And then I never touch the investments. I've gotten tempted to pull from some of those investments into another asset, but I could never just go and like take that and just like, bloop, there you go, I'm going to spend it over here. Anything I spend is really just from the active income pile, and then all the active income goes to the investment pile. That grows. And then I like to think that at some point, I could spend 3% of that a year. At some point. And the bigger it grows, the more I have to look forward to spending the 3%, because I let that just keep compounding. So every year I don't spend 3%, I could spend 3% of the 3% in the future. Because right now, I don't have a family. It's just, it's me, the wife, dog, 2 cats, aquarium. So now I feel like it's like the ideal time to be saving, right? And then when you have a family, other expenses, yeah, you could start to live a little. But I feel like under the age of 35, as long as you don't have a family, you may as well just be saving as much as possible.
Now, the first trap is the most common and the quietest. The plan works, the math supports a comfortable retirement, so they do retire. But the retiree ends up spending far less than the plan allows. Not because they have to, but because spending feels dangerous in a way that they cannot fully explain. And it happens at the exact time they most want to spend, early retirement.
Yeah, just because it feels like you're working backwards in a video game. Like you spent all of this time playing this video game and you accumulated all these like gold coins and stuff like that. It's the whole purpose of the game. You accumulated the gold coins and now you're spending it down. It feels like you're just working in reverse. Like all of your hard work just kind of poof, it's gone. It's difficult. Even though when they really look at the studies, more people underspend in retirement than overspend, which sounds crazy, but the type of person to be able to save $2 to $3 million diligently is not going to be the type of person who's going and buying Lambos, going and buying private jets, first class tickets around the world, bottles. Like, you're not doing that. So if you could save $2 to $3 million diligently over decades, you're probably going to be pretty smart about it. And therefore, that type of person has more money at the end of their retirement than less. So, but, take that for what it's worth.
I've seen this with people who have, let's say, $2.4 million, a solid plan and everything in place, and they're withdrawing just 1.6 per year.
Here's the thing though, at the end of the day, money and success are only valuable if you're actually healthy enough to enjoy it. Like, you could save as much money as possible, invest, build wealth, but none of that matters if you neglect the one asset that matters the most: your health. In fact, true story here, but after years of putting it off, I finally did blood panel testing. Even though I thought everything was fine, as it turned out, I was deficient in a few nutrients, and then also it turned out I had a slight thyroid issue that left me kind of feeling tired and brain fogged throughout the day. Regardless of how much I slept, I always just chalked it up to, just having a bad day. Thankfully though, I was actually able to pinpoint exactly what it was. I was able to take some over-the-counter vitamins. It was pretty easy. And a few weeks later, I legitimately felt like a brand new person. That's why it is so important to test your biomarkers, even if you think you're totally fine. And one of the best ways to do that is actually with our sponsor, Hone Health. For those unaware, Hone Health is a longevity telehealth clinic that helps men get a clearer understanding of what's going on inside their body. With this, one test covers over 50 biomarkers. We're talking heart, hormones, testosterone, thyroid, metabolic health, and more, so you actually know what's going on, not just guessing. And then from there, a physician reviews the results with you and builds a plan. So they're not just dropping a report in the app. Now, I'm obviously not a medical professional, but Hone connects you with a licensed physician who will walk you through the benefits and risks before you start anything, which could include TRT, peptides, treatments for hair loss, or other supplements, all based on your test results. Plus, they have 4.8 stars on Trustpilot. So if you're interested, get tested, get treated, and get back to looking and feeling 100%. Get your test for $65 using the link down below in the description or scanning the QR code on the screen to learn more and sign up today. Again, that link is down below in the description, or you can just scan the QR code on the screen. Thank you so much. Now let's get back to the video.
When I ask what they are afraid of, the answer is often something like, I just feel like the moment I start spending, it's going to disappear. And that line tells me everything. Because underneath it is not really a fear about money, it's a fear about control. The feeling is something like a runaway train. Right now, you're holding it at the station. But the moment you let it go, the moment you buy the plane ticket or book the hotel or say yes to something, you're not going to be able to pull it back.
You know, it's so funny. I feel the exact same way because I never want to feel like I'm moving backwards. Like the video game analogy. I feel like if I add an expense, it's really hard to take that expense away. Like, it's always easy to add more. You could always do more trips, better flights, better food. But then once you start doing that, it's hard to rein it back. It's hard to go from like first class back to economy. It's hard to go from these nicer restaurants back to McDonald's. It's hard to go from a really nice location house down to a much more modest sized house on the other side of town that's much more difficult to get to. So I always like to think that if I add something, I want it to be in perpetuity, and then if I don't need it, I could always do it later, which saves some more money. So that's my mindset when it comes to this.
That's not a financial problem. That is what happens when a realistic concern runs long enough unchecked that it stops being realistic. And the cost is not financial ruin. The cost is years of the healthiest retirement, the go-go years, lived inside a scarcity mindset that was never needed.
Funny, I actually looked up the best age to begin spending when you account for compound interest. Because here's the thing, when you're 20 years old, the opportunity cost of $1 could turn into something like $10 to $13 by the time you're 65. So the opportunity cost of every dollar at 20, I thought was pretty high. But the opportunity cost of your money at 55 is much lower because it has less time to compound. And so when I was running the calculations on this, believe it or not, the optimal age to start spending, assuming you have a big enough nest egg, is really around 42 to 45. And that begins to be the tipping point when, more contributions don't see quite the outsized return as just enjoying your money today. So for whatever that's worth, for anyone who's in the situation, seems to be 42 to 45, tables turn, it's a little better to start spending then.
Now, the second trap is a specific version of underspending, but the psychology behind it is different enough to name it separately. This person does not just avoid spending, they have a number in their head, and it's usually the balance on the day they retired, and that number has become sacred. Watching the portfolio drop below it, even temporarily, even in a normal market correction, feels like failure to them.
That's so funny. I've had all of those. Every milestone you could think of, I'm like, okay, that, I don't want to drop below that. And then so, I'll put some money aside and tax-free muni bonds or this and that and just kind of buffer the portfolio. So if the market drops 20%, it's still going to be at that number. It's so weird how psychological numbers really play a huge effect on your investments and your net worth and your portfolio strategy. Meanwhile, really a dollar plus or minus is not going to make that big of a difference. But when you see it on a screen and all of a sudden the number ticks downwards, below that threshold, she describes this perfectly.
The third trap is the one I see most often with successful professionals in their late 50s and early 60s. The plan works, numbers there, and there's always one more reason this particular year is a bad year to retire. This year, the vesting schedule is not quite done. This year, the market is just a little too uncertain. This year, the kids are in transition. This year, the health insurance through the employer is too good to walk away from. Next year, after the bonus, after the merger closes, after things settle down.
Yeah, I could see that easily happening, especially if you just say one more year, then you lock in the new number as your portfolio grows. And then you say, well, one more year, because then that way, if the portfolio drops, I'm making enough to keep that number. And then, another year could be, maybe the market's a little uncertain. It couldn't hurt just to lock in another year's of income there, just kind of as a buffer. And then 10 years goes by. So I can absolutely see this happening. I think this is especially important, probably more so in your 50s than 30s, 40s. But again, depends on where you are in life. But I could see this hitting a lot of people 50s and 60s where they just can't stop. Because imagine you're working 40 years straight on this one thing, giving that up. It's easy to go an extra few years when you've already been doing 40 of it.
The fourth trap is usually the deepest one, and it's one that underlies all the others. This is the person who has spent so long building something, a career, a title, a reputation, that the work and the self have become the same thing. Not necessarily by choice, just by accumulation, decades of prioritizing their career, of being the person who delivers, who leads, and who solves problems. And somewhere along the way, without quite meaning to, the job intertwines with their identity. And retirement does not just mean leaving a job, it means leaving the primary source of structure, validation, purpose, and proof of worth that has defined daily living for 30 years.
The thing is, you have to retire to something, not retire away from something, is what they say. Because if you just quit cold turkey, you stop working, and you twiddle your thumbs all day, you're going to get so bored, so sad, so just everything's going to be meaningless. There's not going to be any purpose. But you have to figure out what you're going to be doing. So if you retire to something, like I'm retiring to do all these things and these tasks over here and doing this and getting to do that, and I don't have time to do all those things because of this, then that's healthy. Then that's a great way to do it. But if you're just retiring for the sake of I'm supposed to, or I have enough and I don't need to know this anymore, then all of a sudden I think you're going to be pretty unhappy.
What separates the retirees who navigate the high achiever paradox from the ones who get caught in it is not intelligence or financial sophistication. It's a pre-committed process. Because here's what I've observed after working with people in this range.
I always just tend to look at expenses of is that a waste of money? Is that just disrespectful for the amount of money that goes into, working for this and what that could purchase? Is that disrespectful to the money? So if a first class plane ticket is $15 grand, where, you basically get the same thing, down the aisle for $1,000, I'm just thinking that difference, that $14,000 difference, That ain't worth it. That's a waste of money. That's disrespectful for the money. People work really hard for that. Let's not waste it on that seat when you're going to arrive at the same time. So I always look at like, hey, is this actually worth how much you're spending on it, for the sacrifice that goes in? If it is, then by all means. I think certain meals, certain experiences, 100% worth it. But a lot of other stuff, it's like, even if you can't afford it, I just think, it's a waste of money. There's other things you could do with it instead.
First, write down what the money is actually for. Not in general terms, but be specific. The trip to Italy, time with your grandchildren, the freedom to say no, the thing you actually built this for.
You know what's really interesting? I highly recommend everybody do this exercise. Go through what you would consider to be your perfect life and really price it out. It's actually quite surprising. Most people never do this. It's not long, like 20, 30 minutes. Think about if you have a house, how much is that house going to cost? Do you buy it outright in cash? Do you get a mortgage? How much is your mortgage going to be? How much is property taxes? How much is insurance? How much utilities? Get your housing cost out of the way. And I'm talking like, a house that's either like in range of what you could afford, maybe a dream house. Then what type of car you drive, where you go out to eat, how much you spend at restaurants, how much you spend on car insurance on the car itself. What about flights? What about other expenses, health insurance? Itemize every little thing and then get the total of that. And then take that total and multiply it by 25 to 30. And that's how much you'll need annually to basically support that lifestyle. And then you could work backwards. Then once you hit that number, that's your perfect lifestyle. And if you want to put, a little buffer on it, 10, 15%, by all means. But most people never even do that. So they have no idea how much they want to spend or how much their life is going to cost them. And then they just meaninglessly go about work, saving money, doing all this stuff without having any idea of what they're saving for or the type of lifestyle they want or how much that's even going to cost. It might be a lot more than you expect, or it might be a lot less. I have a feeling it'll probably be a little less than you expect when you really price everything out. Obviously, unless you're not living in like penthouses in Manhattan and flying private jets, like, okay, fine. Get rid of that sort of stuff. But like a reasonable lifestyle, most people never do this. It's probably going to be one of the best exercises you could ever do.
The third thing you can do is to review annually or twice a year, but not constantly.
A few times. Dude, I check my accounts like several times a day. What does that say about me? When I'm waking up, it's funny. It's the first thing I check, portfolio. And then I check at lunch. I check right before market close. And then I check afterwards because sometimes the indexes, they update around like 3 p.m. Pacific's time. And I like to see where they closed at because they're not trading throughout the day. What does that say about me when I check that often?
The high achiever paradox is not obvious to everyone because it's built entirely out of the behaviors that made you successful in the first place. But the risk you face is continuing a habit that actually starts to work against you the moment you reach the goal. It is possible to make the shift and enjoy the retirement you built, but first, you have to recognize when the habit is running the show.
So with that said, spending is something that I definitely still have a lot of I don't like it. I get a lot of enjoyment, like genuinely. I get a lot of enjoyment from just like saving. Love saving. Like if I see something I want and then I don't buy it, I'm like, ooh, I just saved the money. I feel good not buying things, which is it's a superpower, but it's also like, my gosh, sometimes it nips me in the butt when I cheap out on something. I look back, it's like, oh, I should have done it. Why did I do that? This is dumb. So let me know what you think down below in the comments section. If you've had any experiences retiring early, retiring and spending down the principal. I read all the comments. So if you comment anything, just I see it. Thank you so much, and until next time.